I was late for Christmas dinner at my daughter's house, hoping for a warm family gathering. But when I quietly opened the door, my son-in-law was making a toast. How nice that the old man didn't come. I hope he's gone for good. My daughter laughed the loudest. I silently closed the door, turned around, and walked away. An hour later, their celebration turned into a nightmare. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching. The Selwood Bridge traffic was suffocating. My hands gripped the steering wheel as rain hammered the windshield, each drop a small explosion against the glass. 40 minutes late. The dashboard clock glowed accusingly. 7:47 p.m. Construction had narrowed the bridge to one lane, and every driver in Portland apparently had somewhere urgent to be on Christmas Eve. I glanced at the back seat. 2 wrapped boxes sat there, perfect corners, expensive paper. The cashmere scarf for Jean had cost me $180s at Nordstrom. The bourbon for Clifford, a 20-year Pappy Van Winkle, had been $220. Numbers that seemed reasonable when I was thinking about family, about tradition, about making my late wife proud. Sarah would have liked that I kept trying with Jean. 3 years since the cancer took her, and I'd been doing what she would have wanted, taking care of our daughter. The mortgage payments, $2,400 every single month, transferred on the 1st. Reliable as sunrise, $86,400 over 3 years. The house I'd helped them buy, the foundation I'd helped them build. Traffic finally broke. I accelerated across the bridge, tires hissing on wet pavement. Jean's neighborhood looked perfect, every house decorated, warm light spilling from windows, inflatable snowmen swaying in front yards. I pulled into the driveway behind several cars I didn't recognize. Company. She'd mentioned inviting friends. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror, smoothed my collar, ran a hand through my gray hair. Presentable, dignified. A father arriving for dinner with his daughter. The gifts felt heavier as I carried them up the walkway. Through the front window, I could see figures moving, hear laughter. My finger hovered over the doorbell, then moved to the doorknob instead. No need to make them answer. I was family. The door opened silently on well-oiled hinges. I stepped into the entryway and froze. The scene assembled itself in fragments. Dining room table to my left. 8 people seated. Wine glasses catching candlelight. A turkey at the center. Garland draped along the mantel. Jean's wedding china, the set that had been Sarah's, that I'd given them when they married. The expensive Malbec I'd sent last month. 3 bottles now empty on the sideboard. The dining table I'd helped Jean pick out at that furniture store in Beaverton. No one had noticed me. They were all facing the head of the table, where Clifford stood, wine glass raised, his face flushed and jovial. His voice carried clearly. "Thank goodness that old man didn't show up tonight. I hope he disappeared forever. Maybe we finally got lucky this Christmas." The words landed like physical blows. I stood motionless, gifts in hand, a ghost witnessing his own funeral. Someone, a man I didn't recognize, called out, "Finally we can breathe!" Another voice, "Best Christmas gift ever." Then Jean laughed. My daughter's laughter rose above everyone else's. That uninhibited sound I remembered from her childhood, genuine and unrestrained. She wasn't uncomfortable. She wasn't defending me. Her hand pressed the table for support, her face bright with amusement, completely relaxed in her mockery. My hand remained on the doorknob. 3 seconds. 4. The room blurred at the edges while the center remained sharp. Clifford's smug face, Jean's profile, the raised glasses, the casual cruelty of people who felt safe among allies. I closed the door. Not a slam, just a soft click. The walk back to my car stretched longer than the walk to the house. My feet moved automatically, each step measured. I opened the rear door and placed the gifts on the seat, not throwing them, not crushing them, just setting them down with mechanical precision. The cashmere scarf, the expensive bourbon. Numbers I was suddenly seeing differently. I sat in the driver's seat and didn't start the engine. Rain continued falling, softer now, almost gentle. Christmas lights blinked in windows up and down the street. Red, green, white, blue. Families inside, probably. Real families. I opened my phone's banking app. The transfer history loaded, monthly payments marching backward through time, each one exactly $2,400. each one labeled mortgage assistance. December, November, October. Backward through this year, last year, the year before. I scrolled to the beginning. December 2021. The first payment. The month after Sarah died, when Jean had called crying about foreclosure, when being a good father meant helping however I could. $86,400 total. The number glowed on my screen. I took a screenshot, then opened my contacts. Robert Kane answered on the second ring. Robert, I need to meet tomorrow morning. First thing, everything has changed. He started to ask something, but I cut him off gently. Tomorrow, early. I ended the call and sat in silence. 3 blocks away from Jean's house now. I didn't remember driving here, but here I was, parked under a streetlight that cast everything in amber. The gifts were still in the back seat. The rain had stopped. Somewhere, church bells were ringing. I looked at the banking app one more time before closing it. $86,400, I said aloud to the empty car. Not a question, not an exclamation, just a fact that would define everything coming next. Robert Kane's law office occupied the 3rd floor of a renovated building in the Pearl District. I'd been sitting in my car in the parking lot since sunrise, watching the windows, waiting. When Robert's silver Lexus pulled into his reserve spot at 8:15 a.m., he saw me immediately and walked directly to the entrance without the usual pleasantries. He knew me well enough to recognize urgency disguised as patience. The office was minimalist, glass, steel, and white walls. So different from yesterday's warm, decorated house. Robert unlocked the door, flipped lights on, and gestured me toward the conference room without a word. I carried a manila folder I'd assembled during the sleepless night. Coffee? He asked. No, thank you. We sat across from each other at the long table. I opened the folder and began laying out documents with the same precision I'd once used arranging blueprints. Bank statements first, 3 years of monthly transfers highlighted in yellow. Then the printed emails from December 2021, screenshots of text messages, everything organized by date, with neat tabs separating categories. Robert pulled on his reading glasses and began reviewing the materials. He was 52, had been handling my legal affairs for 15 years. Estate planning, business contracts during my architectural practice, Sarah's will. He understood how my mind worked. Tell me what happened, he said, not looking up from the bank statements. I recounted Christmas Eve with clinical precision, the traffic, the late arrival, the unopened door, Clifford's toast, word for word, the laughter, Jean's laughter, loudest and longest, my silent exit, no emotion in my voice, just facts, sequence, evidence. Robert set down the bank statements and picked up the email thread from 3 years ago. I'd printed the entire exchange. He read aloud, I'll help with the mortgage until you're financially stable. This is temporary support. He looked at me. Jean's response, thank you, Dad. We'll pay you back when we can. He removed his glasses. This changes everything. In Oregon, this establishes loan intent, not gift intent. Combined with your payment documentation, the labeled transfers, the explicit mention of repayment, Dennis, you have a recoverable loan. What's the process? Formal demand letter, 60-day response period. If they refuse payment or ignore the demand, we file in circuit court for breach of contract. With this documentation, your likelihood of success is excellent. I took notes in my small, precise handwriting. Timeline? Demand letter drafted today, sent via certified mail tomorrow. They'll have 60 days to respond or arrange payment. If they refuse, we file. Court date within 90 days, typically. Costs? $5,000 retainer. If it goes to trial, possibly $10,000 to $15,000 total, but that's worst case. Most family loan disputes settle once defendants realize the documentation is solid. He paused. Dennis, are you certain? This is your daughter. Completely certain. He didn't ask again. We spent the next 2 hours building the strategy. Robert pulled up Oregon revised statutes on his computer, read sections aloud about verbal and written agreements, about family loan enforcement, about documentation requirements. We drafted the demand letter together, formal, precise, leaving no room for misinterpretation. When he slid the engagement letter across the table, I reviewed the fee structure carefully before signing. My signature was steady. I wrote a check for $5,000 without hesitation. An investment in justice, not revenge. I'll have the demand letter ready for your review by this afternoon, Robert said as I stood to leave. Certified mail goes out tomorrow morning. We shook hands. His grip was firm, professional, sealing a contract we both understood. I drove to a coffee shop in the Alberta district and sat in the window booth for an hour. The coffee grew cold, untouched. Outside, people moved through their normal post-Christmas routines, returning gifts, spending gift cards, living uncomplicated lives. I watched them and processed what I'd set in motion. The daughter I'd raised was now officially an adversary in a legal proceeding. The house I'd helped purchase was now collateral in a debt recovery case. The family I'd protected was now the opposition. I drove home as afternoon light faded to dusk. My living room looked exactly as it had for 3 years. Same furniture, same photographs on the mantle, same silence. This was the room where Sarah died, where hospice nurses had come and gone, where I'd held her hand during those final hours. This was the room where I'd decided to help Jean with the house because that's what family does. My phone rang at 6:30 p.m. Jean's name on the screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Each ring would increase her anxiety slightly, a small recalibration of power dynamics. Hello, Jean. Dad, why didn't you come to dinner last night? We were so worried. Clifford kept checking outside, thought maybe you had car trouble. We saved you a plate. When can you come by to get it? Her voice dripped with false concern, honey-sweet manipulation. She had no idea I'd heard everything. Her lies were reflexive, automatic, polished by years of practice I'd been too blind to notice. I had matters to attend to. Everything is fine. Pause. I could hear her confusion. Well, okay, but about the plate? No, I won't need the plate. Donate it or dispose of it. Longer pause. Oh, okay. Well, we're planning New Year's dinner too. Same group, maybe a few more people. Can you come? Maybe around 6? I have plans. Let's keep in touch through phone for now. Dad, is everything okay? You sound different. Yes. Goodbye, John. I ended the call and set the phone down. Professional distance, no emotion, no explanation. Let her wonder, let her worry. The demand letter would arrive in 2 days and provide all the explanation necessary. I stood and walked to the mantel, picking up the framed photograph of Sarah, the only moment my composure cracked, privately, where no one could see. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I said to her image. I was blind. I let our daughter become someone you wouldn't recognize. I should have seen it sooner, but I'm seeing clearly now. Not a question, a statement, a promise. I set the photograph back carefully, aligned it precisely with the others, and returned to my chair. Somewhere in southeast Portland, Jean was probably calling Clifford, confused about her father's strange tone. They'd discuss it over wine, dismiss it as old-age grumpiness, and return to their evening. They had 2 days of peace left before the certified letter arrived. 2 days before they learned that $86,400 doesn't disappear just because you wish the lender would. My phone buzzed against the side table. Jean's name lit the screen, then faded to black. 3 minutes later, it buzzed again. Clifford this time, then Jean, then Clifford. New Year's Eve, and I sat in my armchair watching the display cycle through their desperation. Outside my window, neighbors launched fireworks, quick bursts of red and gold against the winter sky, brief celebrations that dissolved into smoke. I'd spent the week since meeting with Robert living normally, grocery shopping, reading, walking the neighborhood, preparing mentally for what came next. The certified letter had been sent on the 30th. 2-day delivery, signature required. Robert had provided tracking confirmation. January 2nd would be the first business day after the holiday. That's when it would arrive. That's when they'd understand. My phone buzzed again. 8 calls in 2 hours. I could imagine them at some New Year's party, stepping outside between cocktails, voices rising with each unanswered attempt. Were they still laughing? Did Clifford toast again, confident that his old fool of a father-in-law would eventually answer, would eventually cave, would eventually forgive? I picked up my book, a biography I'd been reading for weeks, and turned to the marked page. The phone buzzed twice more before midnight, then fell silent. The next day crawled past. I cleaned the kitchen, organized my study, did normal Saturday things. The tracking information updated at noon, out for delivery. At 2 o'clock, my laptop chimed with the confirmation email. Delivered, signed for by C. Hayes. I forwarded it to Robert with a single line. Delivered and signed for. Then I closed the laptop and went for a walk around the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, everyone sleeping off their celebrations. I walked for an hour, breathing cold air, feeling nothing but a strange calm. My phone erupted at 2:17 p.m. I was back home, drinking coffee at the kitchen table, when the screen started lighting up in rapid succession. Jean, Jean, Clifford, Jean, Clifford, Jean, Jean, Jean. 8 calls in 11 minutes. I counted them, sipping my coffee, watching the display pulse with their panic. Then the text messages began. Dad, I just got a letter from a lawyer. Please call me. This must be a mistake. I took a screenshot, opened the next message. We need to talk right now. This is insane. Screenshot. Dad, please, we need to talk about this. You can't just ignore me. The messages accelerated, tone shifting with each one. Confusion giving way to anger, anger bleeding into desperation. I read them all carefully, noting the progression, the manipulation tactics, the absence of any genuine apology, always focused on my actions, never on theirs. This is cruel. How can you do this to your own daughter, after everything we've been through? Screenshot. Fine, be that way, but you're destroying this family. I hope you can live with yourself. I let them sit with it. Let the hours pass. I made dinner, chicken breast, roasted vegetables, nothing fancy. Ate slowly, washed dishes, dried them, put them away in their proper places. At 6:30, I composed my response, typed several versions, deleted them. Too emotional, too long, too explanatory. Finally settled on what mattered. All questions to my attorney, contact info in letter. 13 words. I pressed send and immediately powered off my phone. I didn't need to see their response. The message was perfectly clear. The relationship they had taken for granted no longer existed. The father they'd mocked was now the creditor they'd have to face. That evening, I stood in my study looking at the family photo wall. Jean, as a toddler on my shoulders at the zoo, her high school graduation, cap tilted at an angle, her wedding day, me walking her down the aisle while Sarah dabbed tears from her eyes. My wife appeared in nearly every frame, smiling, radiant, proud of the family we'd built. I didn't take the pictures down. They were part of the architecture of my life, the foundation that had been real, even if the structure built on top had proven unstable. Tomorrow, the legal clock would start its 60-day countdown. Tomorrow, they'd begin to understand that some things, once broken, cannot be repaired. I turned off the study light and went to bed. Outside, a few late fireworks popped in the distance. New year, new reality, for all of us. The attorney's office smelled like old carpet and desperation. Clifford sat across from a man in his 50s wearing a tie with coffee stains, watching him read through the documents with increasing grimness. 5 days had passed since the demand letter arrived. Clifford had spent them Googling phrases like "fight family loan" and reading forum posts from people who'd successfully avoided debts. He'd convinced himself my case was weak. I learned all this later from Marcus, my grandson, who maintained contact with both sides of the family despite the growing divide. He was 23, worked in tech, had the kind of sharp intelligence that let him see through pretense. He'd heard his mother's version of the legal consultation and understood enough to know I'd want the details. The budget attorney, Marcus said his office was in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, had reviewed everything Clifford brought, the email thread, the bank statements I'd included with the demand letter, the timing, the language, the systematic documentation. Well, Clifford had asked, expecting validation. The attorney sighed. Mr. Hayes, I won't take your money if I can't help you. Your father-in-law has a strong case, bank records showing consistent $2,400 payments, labeled as loan or mortgage assistance, spanning 3 years, email documentation establishing repayment intent. Oregon recognizes verbal loan agreements, especially with this level of documentation. You could fight it, spend thousands on legal fees, and still lose. Then you'd owe the original amount plus court costs. Marcus said Clifford's face had gone red. But he never asked for repayment, not once in 3 years. Doesn't that prove it was a gift? The attorney shook his head. Actually, it suggests patience or trust, neither of which negates the loan structure. The initial agreement called it temporary support. Your wife acknowledged future repayment. The court will see this as a family loan that's now being called due. It happens. Clifford left that office and called Jean from his car. Marcus heard her side of the conversation later that evening. "He says we're screwed," Clifford told her. "The old man set us up. Everything documented. Even that email you sent." "What email?" Jean's voice had gone high, panicked. "The one where you said, we'll pay you back when we can. 3 years ago. You don't remember?" Silence. She remembered. I learned Jean made her decision that night. She'd ambush me in person, use the tactics that had always worked. Tears, invocation of her mother's memory, the particular kind of emotional manipulation she'd perfected over 35 years. She knew my routine. I shopped at Trader Joe's every other Monday, usually late morning. She'd grown up 10 minutes from my house, had lived in the area her entire life. Some patterns become common knowledge in families. I arrived at the parking lot at 10:52 on the second Monday after New Year's. The day was cold, gray clouds threatening rain. I parked in my usual spot near the cart return and was halfway to the entrance when Jean stepped directly into my path. I stopped. Didn't step back, didn't create space for a lengthy conversation. Just stopped, shopping bag in one hand, keys in the other. Dad, please, we need to talk. This is crazy. Lawyers, legal letters. It's me, your daughter. Can't we just sit down like family and work this out? Mom wouldn't want this." She reached toward my arm, but didn't quite touch me. Using Sarah, the final manipulation, the one that had always worked. "My daughter died that Christmas evening." My voice was quiet, matter of fact. Jean's face went white. "What? Dad, I heard you laughing. I heard Clifford's toast about hoping I'd disappeared forever. I was standing in the doorway. I heard everything." The shopping bag hung from my hand, casual, ordinary, while I delivered the words that destroyed her carefully constructed reality. "It was a joke. Dad, it was just, Clifford was drunk. I wasn't interested in excuses. 60 days. Dad, please, we don't have that kind of money. You know we don't. What are we supposed to? Then court. That's how the law works." I stepped around her and continued toward the entrance. She called after me. "You're destroying our lives." I stopped, turned halfway back. "No, I'm collecting what's owed. There's a difference." The automatic doors slid open. I walked through them without looking back. Behind me, Jean stood frozen in the parking lot. A woman with a cart asked if she was okay. I heard the question as the doors closed. Jean didn't answer. She walked back to her car, sat in the driver's seat, and only then did the full reality of what I'd said penetrate the shock. Her father had been there, at the door. Christmas Eve. He'd heard Clifford's toast, heard the laughter, heard her, his own daughter, laughing loudest of all. Every worried call since then, every text message asking where he'd been, every expression of concern had been a lie. And he'd known. He'd known from the very beginning. Marcus told me later that Jean had gripped the steering wheel and screamed. Not grief, he said. Pure rage at being caught. At realizing her father couldn't be manipulated anymore. At understanding that 60 days meant exactly what it said, and that the clock was ticking, whether she accepted it or not. I finished my shopping. Spinach, chicken, whole grain bread, the ordinary things that constitute a life. Paid at the register. Loaded the bags into my car. Drove home through the gray afternoon. That evening, I reviewed my financial records again. Not because I doubted the numbers, but because seeing them reinforced the correctness of my decision. $86,400. 3 years of sacrificing my own retirement comfort for people who toasted to my disappearance. The numbers didn't lie. The laughter didn't lie. 47 days remained. 3 weeks passed. I spent them reviewing my monthly budget spreadsheet, walking the neighborhood, reading books I'd been meaning to finish. Normal life, deliberately maintained. The phone call from Marcus came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was organizing my tax documents. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something." His voice carried that particular tension that meant bad news. "Dad's been calling people from Christmas dinner, asking weird questions about you, whether you seemed forgetful, confused, anything like that. Mom didn't want to do it, but she didn't stop him either." I set down my pen. "Thank you for telling me, Marcus. I appreciate your honesty." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." After we hung up, I poured myself coffee and waited. The financial math was brutal and inescapable. Marcus had mentioned their late-night arguments, Jean screaming about their bank balance, Clifford insisting I'd back down. They had $12,000 saved. They owed $86,400. Simple subtraction revealed their desperation. People who have been cornered don't surrender. They attack. The confirmation call came 2 days later from an old colleague. Someone's been asking about you, asking if you seemed forgetful at events, if you repeated yourself, if you had trouble with directions. I thanked him and added it to my notes. They were building a false narrative, amateur hour, but dangerous nonetheless. I created a timeline document that evening. Left column, dates of my mortgage payments to John and Clifford. Right column, major life events proving mental competency. Refinancing my own home, complex investment decisions, consulting work after retirement. 3 years of evidence that I'd been sharp, careful, methodical. The social worker arrived on a Tuesday morning. No warning, no appointment. I answered the door to find a woman in her 40s with a tablet and a practiced expression of concern. Mr. Olson, I'm Sarah Chen from Adult Protective Services. We received a report about your well-being. May I come in? I stepped aside, gestured her to the living room. My coffee was already made, my documents already organized on the dining table. Mr. Olson, can you tell me why we're here today? My son-in-law filed a complaint suggesting I have dementia or mental impairment. He did this because I'm collecting a substantial family debt through legal channels. He hopes declaring me incompetent will invalidate the debt. It won't, but I understand why he's trying. Sarah's expression remained neutral, but I caught the slight shift in her posture. She'd heard this story before. Family using the system as a weapon. The assessment took 90 minutes. Count backward from 100 by sevens. Draw a clock showing 3:15. Remember 3 words and repeat them later. Name the current president, the previous president, today's date. I answered every question correctly, calmly, without hesitation. The clock drawing was almost insulting in its simplicity. I sketched a perfect circle freehand, positioned all 12 numbers precisely, drew hour and minute hands to exactly 3:15. 40 years of architectural drafting made this trivial. You have steady hands, Sarah commented. 40 years of technical drawing, some skills don't fade. When she asked about finances, I pulled up my investment portfolio on my laptop. 60% equities, 30% bonds, 10% cash equivalents. I rebalance quarterly based on market conditions and my age-appropriate risk tolerance, currently generating approximately $78,000 in annual passive income. Sarah took notes. Do you manage these accounts yourself? Every transaction, I review statements weekly, tax documents quarterly. Last year, I generated $78,000 in investment income and paid $14,200 in taxes. My accountant handles the filing, but I verify every number. That's more than most people my age manage. I allowed myself a small smile. Experience helps. Her final questions probed the family situation. Your son-in-law says you've made threats, acted with unusual hostility toward your daughter. Is there conflict in the family? I didn't hedge. Yes, I overheard them mocking me at a family gathering, celebrating my absence, hoping I'd disappear permanently. I decided to collect the money I'd loaned them. That's not hostility, that's consequences. I slid the legal demand letter across the table. Sarah read it, then closed her tablet. Mr. Olson, I see no evidence of impairment. I'll be closing this case. After she left, I sat in silence for exactly 5 minutes. They'd really thought this would work. Thought they could paint me as a confused old man who didn't understand his own decisions. That's what they saw when they looked at me. Not a person, just an obstacle. An obstacle they could remove with lies and manipulation. I picked up my phone and called Robert. Robert, they just tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Adult Protective Services came to my home. Obviously it failed. I'm not incompetent. But this tells me everything I need to know about how far they'll go. Robert's voice was grim. That's actually good for us legally. Demonstrates bad faith. I'll note it in the file. Time to move to the next phase. File the lawsuit. I'm done waiting. The rain hammered Portland streets the morning the 60-day deadline expired. I sat in Robert's conference room, watching water stream down the windows while he spread the court filing across the table. Multnomah County Circuit Court. Case type, debt collection, amount, $86,400. They had until midnight last night, Robert said. They didn't pay, couldn't pay. My paralegal filed electronically at 9 this morning. He tapped the document. It's official now. Case number 25CV04892. Trial set for mid-April, but realistically, we're looking at settlement discussions before then. What if they don't settle? Then we go to trial and win. Either way, you'll get your money back. The question is how much additional legal fees they want to accumulate fighting the inevitable. I nodded once, saved the PDF he'd emailed me, and drove home through the rain. 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I recognized, my bank's main office. Mr. Olson, this is Patricia Vance from Premier Banking. I'm calling as a courtesy. You've been our customer for 26 years. We received an application for a second mortgage on a property where you're listed as paying the primary mortgage. I listened carefully. The application was denied, but I wanted to inform you in case there's identity theft involved. No identity theft, Patricia, just desperation. What were the details? Mr. Hayes wanted to borrow $90,000 against the property, presumably to pay you and cover the loan costs. But his debt-to-income ratio came back at 68%, far above our lending threshold. Between his current mortgage, car loans, and credit cards, he's already overextended. I appreciate the courtesy call. After we hung up, I made notes in my precise handwriting. Date, time, Patricia's name, Clifford's failed attempt, documentation matters, paper trails protect truth from being rewritten. The first hearing arrived with bureaucratic efficiency. Robert handled it alone. I didn't need to attend yet. He called me afterward from the courthouse steps. Judge McCreary assigned to the case. She's fair, no nonsense. Didn't resolve anything today, but ordered interim payments pending trial. $2,000 monthly, starting March 1st. I calculated immediately. Their mortgage plus this meant over half their income gone before they bought groceries. Good. Robert paused. Dennis, you sound almost pleased. I'm pleased that consequences are occurring. That evening, I pulled out my calculator and worked through their budget. $8,083 monthly income, minus $2,400 mortgage, minus $2,000 court-ordered payment, equals $3,683 remaining. I thought about car payments, insurance, utilities, food, gas. The math didn't work. They'd have to borrow or sell something. The squeeze was working exactly as designed. Marcus visited in early March, ostensibly to drop off some tools he had borrowed, but his real purpose was obvious from his slumped shoulders. They're falling apart, Grandpa. Screaming matches every night. Mom found out Dad's been... He hesitated. Betting online, lost about $5,000 over the past year. That's why they never had savings even with you paying the mortgage. Another piece clicking into place. Thank you for telling me. Marcus looked at me steadily. Do you ever regret it, going this far? Every single day, but regret doesn't make it wrong. He absorbed that. Grandpa, I know you have your reasons, but they're really struggling. Mom's working doubles, Dad's borrowed from everyone. Can't you just work something out? I met his eyes. Marcus, did I tell you what I heard that Christmas? Your father's exact words? He shook his head. I recounted the toast, word for word. Marcus's face went pale. I didn't know it was that bad. Neither did I, until it was too late to unknow it. Over the following weeks, Marcus's reports painted a picture of predictable deterioration. Clifford borrowing $3,000 from his boss, $2,000 from his brother, $1,500 from a coworker. Jean working extra shifts, coming home exhausted, finding bills Clifford had hidden. Arguments about money becoming arguments about everything. His drinking, her spending, his family, her father. I started a document titled Timeline March and noted each development. Not because I enjoyed their suffering, I didn't, not really, but because I needed to know if the pressure was achieving its goal, making them understand that actions have consequences. On Marcus's next visit, he looked even more troubled. Mom screamed at Dad last night. You lost $5,000 betting online while my father paid our mortgage? No wonder he wants his money back. Dad yelled back, your father's the one destroying us. He could forgive this, but he's choosing not to. And Mom said, he paused. She said, maybe we deserve this. I sat with that sentence for a long moment. Maybe we deserve this. First hint of awareness, not apology, but awareness. Your mother said maybe they deserve this. That's the closest she's come to understanding. I'm not trying to destroy them, Marcus. I'm trying to teach them that people aren't ATMs you can mock while withdrawing from. The lesson is expensive. That's because the disrespect was expensive. Marcus nodded slowly. When does the lesson end? When they've learned it, or when the court decides, whichever comes first. After he left, I stood at my window, watching evenings settle over the neighborhood, lights coming on in houses, families having dinner, normal life continuing while mine had become this strange, methodical pursuit of justice. The trial was 6 weeks away, 42 days, and counting. The doorbell rang at 3:17 on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-March. I was in my garage building a bookshelf for Marcus, measuring, cutting, sanding. The trial was exactly 1 month away. Through Marcus, I knew John and Clifford were spiraling. More debts, more arguments, more desperation. I set down my tools, wiped sawdust from my hands, and walked to the front door. Clifford's car sat parked at a careless angle in my driveway, one tire up on the grass. He stood on the porch, shoulders hunched, eyes red-rimmed, unshaven, wrinkled shirt, hands trembling. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Stood in the doorway, body blocking the threshold. "You really think you're righteous, don't you?" His voice cracked. "Taking your own daughter to court? You want to destroy us over $86,000? You have plenty of money. This is about control, about punishing John." This wasn't the confident man who'd toasted to my disappearance. This was desperation with a face. "I want justice," I said quietly. "You used my generosity for 3 years, $86,400 to be precise. I paid your mortgage while you spent your income on other things. Then you celebrated my absence, hoped I'd disappear permanently. Now you're facing consequences. That's not punishment, that's cause and effect. You're going to take our house, our home, the same place everyone goes when they can't pay their debts. That's not my concern anymore." His voice rose to a near shout. "We'll go public, tell everyone what kind of father sues his own daughter. You'll be the monster in this story. Every newspaper, every TV station. We'll make sure Portland knows exactly who Dennis Olson really is." Across the street, my neighbor paused from loading groceries, watching. I reached into my pocket with deliberate slowness and pulled out a small Sony digital voice recorder. Set it carefully on the porch railing between us. "Before you do that, let me ask, what do you think happens when I show reporters the bank records, when I play this?" I pressed play without waiting for an answer. The audio was tinny but clear, Clifford's voice through a window. "Thank goodness that old man didn't show up tonight. I hope he disappeared forever. Then we could finally—" I stopped it there. Clifford's face drained of color. You recorded us? That's illegal." Oregon is a one-party consent state. I was present for the conversation. At your door, then by your window. Perfectly legal, also perfectly damning. I picked up the recorder, turned it in my hand. "I have 4 minutes of audio. You toasting to my disappearance, Jean laughing, your guests agreeing. All of it captured clearly. That's entrapment or invasion of... It's evidence. So please go to the media. Tell them about the cruel father. I'll bring the bank records. I'll bring the email where Jean promised to pay me back. I'll bring this recording. We'll see whose story people believe." Clifford backed away from the door, hands raised slightly. He turned, walked down my steps with unsteady movements, got into his car. Sat there for 10 seconds before starting the engine. I watched until his car disappeared around the corner. Then I picked up the recorder, slipped it back into my pocket, and returned to my garage. The bookshelf was 3/4 complete. I picked up the sandpaper and resumed the steady rhythm. Some things couldn't be rushed. 1 week later, Marcus knocked on my door just after dinner. He held a cream-colored envelope, looking uncomfortable. "Mom asked me to give you this. I haven't read it. Didn't want to." I took it from him, my name in Jean's careful handwriting. "She's really sorry, Grandpa. I can see it." "I'll read it." "Will you forgive her?" I met his eyes. "I'll read what she wrote. That's what I can promise right now." After Marcus left, I opened the envelope at my kitchen counter. 3 pages on nice stationery, the kind Sarah used to use. "Dear Dad, I don't know how to start this." The letter was carefully constructed. She missed our Sunday dinners, remembered when I taught her to ride a bike, said her mother would want us to reconcile, acknowledged terrible mistakes, promised she was still my daughter, still loved me, still wanted a chance to make things right. She mentioned Sarah 4 times, mentioned our happy childhood 3 times, mentioned her current suffering twice. Each reference placed strategically, designed to trigger specific emotions. Never mentioned the Christmas toast. Never acknowledged what she'd said or why it had destroyed everything. I read it a second time, analyzing the language. I know I hurt you, without specifying how. I should have been better, without defining what better meant. Please give me another chance, without explaining what would be different. The third read, I looked for what wasn't said. No explanation of the laughter, no acknowledgement of the mockery, no understanding of why celebrating my absence was the breaking point. She was apologizing for getting caught, not for what she'd done. I folded the letter along its original creases, slid it into a manila folder labeled Legal J&C, filed it alphabetically, didn't write a response, didn't call, didn't acknowledge receipt. Silence is also communication. That evening, I sat in my study looking at the family photo wall. Jean at 3, gap-toothed smile. Jean at 16, prom dress. Jean on her wedding day, my arm linked with hers. Sarah in nearly every frame. The trial was 3 weeks away. The courtroom smelled of old wood and recirculated air. I sat in the third row behind Robert Kane's table, wearing a navy suit Sarah had helped me pick out 15 years ago. Still fit. Jean and Clifford sat at the defendant's table with their attorney, Patricia Summers, hired at a discount rate after their first attorney proved too expensive. Jean kept glancing back at me. I didn't meet her eyes, focused on the judge's bench. Judge McCreary entered, a woman in her mid-60s with silver hair and no patience for theatrics. She reviewed the case file before looking up. This appears to be a debt collection matter. Plaintiff claims defendant owes $86,400. Defendant's claim payments were gifts with no repayment obligation. Ms. Summers, you may begin. Patricia Summers stood, straightened her jacket. Your Honor, this case represents a fundamental misunderstanding of family relationships. When parents help adult children, those payments are gifts rooted in love and obligation, not loans expecting repayment. My clients believed reasonably that Mr. Olson's support was parental generosity. Robert Kane's presentation was methodical. He entered the email thread into evidence. Exhibit A. The judge read my initial offer from December 2021 on the courtroom's display screen. I'll help you with the mortgage until you're financially stable. This is temporary support. Then Jean's response. Thank you, Dad. We'll pay you back when we can. Robert let it sit for 10 seconds of silence. Your Honor, the defendant acknowledged future repayment in writing. That establishes loan intent, not gift intent. The bank statements were entered as Exhibits B through D. Robert highlighted the notations on each transfer. Family loan, monthly installment. The plaintiff documented each payment as a loan at the time of transfer. This isn't retrospective recharacterization. This is contemporaneous classification. Combined with the email acknowledgement of repayment obligation, the loan structure is indisputable. Judge McCreary looked at Patricia. Ms. Summers, I'm looking at your client's email from December 2021. She wrote, and I quote, "We'll pay you back when we can." How do you square that with your argument that these were unconditional gifts? Your Honor, that's simply an expression of gratitude, not a binding commitment. It's a commitment to repay, made in writing, following the plaintiff's explicit framing of support as temporary. I'm not seeing ambiguity. I watched John throughout. She sat rigidly, hands clasped on the table. When Robert displayed the email thread, her shoulders sagged visibly. She remembered writing those words, probably thought nothing of it at the time. Automatic pleasantry, something you say to parents. Never imagined those words would be read aloud in court 4 years later, transformed into legal obligation. Clifford's body language deteriorated as evidence accumulated. Started the session leaning back, arms crossed. When the bank statements appeared, he uncrossed his arms, leaned forward. When the judge announced the payment amount, he dropped his head into his hands. Judge McCreary reviewed her notes, typed something into her computer. I find that the preponderance of evidence establishes a loan relationship, not a gift relationship. The December 2021 email thread demonstrates mutual understanding of temporary support with repayment obligation. Bank records confirm contemporaneous classification as loan. Defendant's acknowledgement of repayment intent is explicit and written. She paused. Accordingly, judgment is entered for plaintiff in the amount of $86,400 plus 5% annual interest to be repaid over 18 months at $5,186 monthly, or through property sale with immediate satisfaction of judgment. The gavel sounded. 90 minutes. It was over. Robert gathered his files. Patricia Summers spoke quietly with Jean and Clifford, explaining post-judgment options probably. Jean was crying silently. Clifford stared at the table. I stood, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked toward the exit. Passed within 6 feet of their table. Jean looked up, mouth opening as if to speak. I kept walking. Outside the courthouse, rain was starting. Typical Portland April weather. I paused on the steps, watching Jean and Clifford exit 30 seconds behind me, huddled with their attorney under the building's overhang. Clifford's voice carried in the rain. "Your father is a monster. This is what he wanted, to destroy us completely. $5,000 a month? We can't even pay half that. He knows it. This is cruelty disguised as justice." I heard it clearly, didn't turn around. Monster. No, monsters attack the innocent. I'm collecting from people who celebrated my disappearance. You called me that old man and hoped I'd vanished forever. I'm not a monster. I'm just someone who stopped accepting disrespect disguised as family. There's a difference. You'll learn it over the next 18 months. I walked to my car without looking back, letting the rain spot my suit jacket. The first court-ordered payment arrived on May 3rd, 2 days late, but it arrived. I checked my bank statement that morning and noted it in my spreadsheet, $5,186. Robert had warned me about this pattern. First payment is fear and borrowed money, he'd said over the phone. They'll scrape it together somehow. Second payment is where reality sets in. That's when you'll see who they really are. June 1st came and went. No payment. June 5th, June 10th. By mid-month, I knew what was coming. Robert called on June 15th. They've missed the payment. Under the court's order, that triggers our right to pursue forced liquidation. I'll file the petition tomorrow. I'd expected this. Still, hearing the words made it real. The endgame had begun. "Do it," I said. "This will force the house sale. Are you prepared for that?" I've been prepared since Christmas. The following weeks brought news in fragments, mostly through Marcus. Each visit, he looked more exhausted, caught between warring family factions, trying to maintain relationships with both sides while watching everything crumble. Late June, Clifford lost his job. Showed up late 3 times in 1 week, Marcus reported. Got into a shouting match with his supervisor about commission structure. They let him go on the spot. He paused. He's doing DoorDash deliveries now, food delivery. Makes maybe $30,000 a year instead of $55,000. I absorbed this information, filed it mentally alongside the other data points tracking their ongoing collapse. Dad's falling apart, Grandpa. Barely furnished apartment, eating fast food every meal. Mom's not much better, working double shifts, comes home and just stares at walls. "Do you ever feel bad about it?" Marcus asked quietly. "Every day," I said honestly. "But feeling bad doesn't mean I'm wrong. They need to understand that disrespect has a cost. This is that cost." Early July brought the divorce filing. Marcus showed me the papers, Jean listed as petitioner, citing irreconcilable differences stemming from financial mismanagement and addiction to online gambling. She was blaming Clifford for everything. The asset division requests were almost comical. She wanted the house currently under foreclosure, the cars being repossessed, the furniture worth less than their accumulated debts. "She's trying to salvage something," I observed. Marcus nodded grimly. "There's nothing left to salvage." By mid-July, Clifford had moved out. The house foreclosure process accelerated. Jean received official notice. The property would be sold at auction to satisfy the judgment debt. Then, on a Thursday evening in late July, my phone buzzed while I was watering my garden. Jean's text message appeared. "Dad, please, I need to see you. I understand now what I did wrong. I'm begging you to stop the foreclosure. I have nowhere to go. Please." I stared at the message for a full minute. Could ignore it. Should ignore it, probably. But something in me needed to hear what she thought she understood. Needed to know if 9 months of consequences had taught her anything beyond fear. I typed back, "Stumptown coffee, tomorrow, 2 p.m. The next afternoon, I arrived 10 minutes early. Ordered black coffee, selected a table by the window where we'd have privacy but remain visible. Controlled the environment, positioning matters in every confrontation. Jean arrived looking diminished, thinner, graying hair she hadn't colored, clothes from seasons past. She started talking before I even sat down, words tumbling out in a rush. "I know I failed you. I know what we said at Christmas was horrible. I've lost everything. My marriage, my home, my security. Haven't I been punished enough? Can't you forgive me now? I'm your daughter. Doesn't that mean anything?" I stirred my coffee slowly, let her speak uninterrupted for 3 full minutes. She cycled through all her arguments. She was sorry. She'd learned her lesson. She was suffering. Couldn't I show mercy? I watched her face throughout, searching for genuine remorse versus performed contrition. Saw mostly fear and desperation. The words were right, but the understanding wasn't there. When she finally stopped, I took a sip of coffee before responding. Made her wait. "You think this is punishment?" I said finally. "It's not. It's consequences. And you still don't understand the difference." "But I do understand. I understand respect now, gratitude, all of it. Just stop the foreclosure and I'll prove it to you." I shook my head slowly. "You understand these concepts now because you're losing, not because you've genuinely learned them. That's not growth, Jean. That's fear masquerading as wisdom." "Then what would make you stop?" "Nothing. The legal process is in motion. Consequences don't stop because they become uncomfortable. That's the entire point of consequences." I set my cup down carefully, met her eyes directly. "You asked what you failed to understand. Here it is. You learned the price of greed, losing your house, your marriage, your comfort. But you haven't learned the value of respect, gratitude, or genuine love. Those things can't be learned through loss alone. They have to be chosen. You're crying because you lost something, not because you understand why you lost it. That's the fundamental difference." I stood, buttoned my jacket. "Goodbye, Jean." She called after me as I walked to the door. "Dad, please, I'm begging you." I kept walking, out to my car, unlocked it, sat in the driver's seat, started the engine. Through the window, I could see Jean still sitting at the table, head in her hands. I felt something. Not quite pity, not quite satisfaction, just recognition that the lesson was being delivered, even if she wasn't ready to learn it. I drove away without looking back, letting the coffee shop disappear in my rearview mirror, along with everything that conversation represented. The house sold on August 12th for $485,000. I sat in Robert's office 3 days later, reviewing the final settlement documents on his laptop screen. The distribution was clinical and precise. Mortgage payoff $398,000. My judgment with interest $92,948. Court costs $8,500. Realtor commission $29,100. Jean would receive the remaining $56,552. "Everything's in order," Robert said. "The debt is satisfied. You're whole again, financially speaking." I signed the acknowledgement. He slid the check across the desk. "I was never not whole financially," I said, folding the check into my jacket pocket. "That's not what this was about." "I know, but legally, we measure resolution in dollars. Emotionally, that's your territory." I drove home thinking about that word. Resolution. 3 years of payments, 9 months of legal action, reduced to a single rectangle of paper now resting against my chest. Justice isn't always satisfying, but it is necessary. Marcus appeared at my door a week later. We sat on the back porch with iced tea, the same porch where I'd sat last Christmas morning before everything changed. I'd prepared the space beforehand, swept the leaves, wiped down the table, set out my wife's good glasses. "Did you achieve your goal?" Marcus asked without preamble. I considered the question seriously. I wanted them to understand that people aren't resources to exploit and discard. I wanted consequences for disrespect and manipulation. Did I get that? Partially. They understand consequences. Whether they've learned respect remains to be seen. Mom's working 2 jobs now. Dad declared bankruptcy. Their marriage is over. Was it worth it? The legal battle, the family destruction, all of it? The cost was high, I admitted. But the alternative, accepting disrespect, letting them believe cruelty has no consequences, that cost was higher. Not in money, in dignity. I explained what he didn't know yet. They weren't laughing at a joke. They were celebrating my potential absence, hoping I'd disappear so they could inherit without the inconvenience of my continued existence. That's not family love. That's financial planning disguised as relationship. Marcus absorbed this. That's harsh. It's honest. Harsh would be enjoying her suffering. I don't. But I won't pretend she's learned lessons she hasn't. A week later, I sat in my estate attorney's office, a different lawyer, specialty in probate. I'd brought a typed list of charities I'd researched, organizations serving isolated elderly populations, programs combating elder abuse, meal delivery services for homebound seniors. 70% of my estate to these charitable organizations, I said. 20% to my grandson Marcus. 10% to my daughter Jean, conditional on her completing a financial literacy program and 200 hours of volunteer service within 2 years of my passing. The attorney looked up from his notes. You're certain about the conditions? Completely certain. This isn't a trap. It's a choice. Financial literacy teaches the value of money. Volunteer service teaches the value of people. If she learns both, she's earned the inheritance. And if she doesn't, then she's proven she hasn't changed, and the money goes to charity instead. Her choice entirely. I explained it to Marcus over dinner that evening. He processed it quietly, then said, "You're still giving her a chance, after everything. I'm her father. I can enforce consequences without abandoning hope for growth. The two aren't mutually exclusive. She destroyed my trust. She didn't destroy my capacity to recognize potential change." That night, I sat on my porch as August drew to a close. The sun set over Portland's West Hills, painting the sky orange and purple. For the first time since Sarah died, I sat in her favorite chair. I picked up her photo from the side table, studied her face, forever frozen at 64, smiling at the camera during our last vacation together. I handled it, I told the photo quietly. Our daughter needed to learn respect, and I taught her the only way she could understand, through consequences. You would have been more gentle, but you would have understood why I couldn't be. I set the photo down gently and watched the sun complete its descent. 9 months ago, I stood at their door and heard them wish for my disappearance. Tonight, I sit on my porch, financially whole, legally vindicated, personally intact. I didn't win. Families don't have winners in conflicts like this. But I did something more important. I refused to be a victim. I established that respect matters. I taught consequences. Whether they learned is their story now. Mine is done, and I can live with how it ended. The sky darkened, stars began appearing. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal evening. I was no longer the man who'd carried wrapped gifts to a door on Christmas Eve. I was no longer the fool who'd paid bills while being mocked. I was no longer waiting for someone else to value me. I was simply Dennis Olson, architect, retired, widower, father to a daughter still learning, grandfather to a young man who understood loyalty, a man who knew the difference between being respected and being used, a man who'd reclaimed his dignity. I stood, picked up the empty glasses, and walked inside. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, for the first time in 9 months, I felt something close to peace. Not happiness, not triumph, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd stood his ground when it mattered most. Justice restored, dignity reclaimed, balance achieved. Enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.